In this video, we're going to talk about the GI map test. So this is a stool test approved by the FDA, and it's what Caroline, the functional nutritionist, went over in class. It was one of two tests that she talked about. So she used the GI map for Kelly and then also the MRT, which is a food sensitivity test. So this video is going to focus on this. So let's go to this website, and this is really an informational packet about why you would use the test, how it works, things that you can interpret. But I'll give you a couple of examples of how this is relevant to psychological health. So, for example, so the pathogens, including viral, parasitic, and bacterial infections, all of those things that can occur at the gut level. Now, it can happen in your brain, but we can see evidence of these problems in the gut, in the stool. They can definitely affect your psychological function. So, as an example, if you go into actually, I don't want to, I'll just tell you. If you go into Blackboard and you look at Caroline's assessment for Kelly, if you click on the MRT and GI map within the course content portion of the site, what you'll see is that there's bacterial overgrowth and there is low levels of healthy bacteria in the stool. So what happens when you have insufficient levels of healthy bacteria in the gut? That means your microbiome is compromised, right? So if you don't have the appropriate levels of bacteria in the gut, you have issues with all kinds of things, but one of which is communicating, letting the neurotransmitters that are formed in the gut communicate through the vagus nerve to the brain. Okay, that's just one way. So the purpose of this class is not to go over the idiosyncrasies of that. It's just to say that if you have disruption in your gut, if your microbiome is not what it should be, this test can pick up on that, and then it can give you a very specific protocol to address those gut issues. Because remember, one of the key things in this class to take away is that your gut influences your brain. And in fact, I'm sure you guys have heard that research out that says that the gut is the second brain. That's an oversimplification, but it is true. Okay, so this document goes over exactly how things are analyzed. So it talks about the nature of the test. It is a gastrointestinal microbial assay. And what it does is it looks at the microbial balance that contributes to perturbations in the GI. Okay, so again, when you think of the gastrointestinal tract, do not simply think of the tract itself, right? The body is a holistic, being. All of our systems are related. We have a tendency in modern medicine to kind of compartmentalize different aspects of the body as if they function independently, but that's not how people work, right? So again, these things in the gut affect mental health, okay? And this is an interpretive guide, and all of this can be found on their website, okay? So these are some of the things that can be looked at. I'll give you an example. So the patient that I talked about in the previous video who had cobalt toxicity, so he was actually treated for ulcers, but he never had an H. pylori test, which is oftentimes the cause of ulcers, and he has really high levels of anxiety. Okay, another thing that can contribute to high levels of anxiety is yeast. So candida is something that can really affect your hormones, but also your ability to, maintain self-control. Okay, so what we found is people high in yeast, high in candida, oftentimes they have issues with anxiety. Parasites, that can lead to weight gain, which weight gain is associated with a wealth of, cognitive issues, and they have a higher occurrence of psychological disturbance. Again, this is not a blanket statement. These are just statistics. So, okay, and the other thing too that's really important is that these tests, these markers, if you have been on antibiotics, chances are that your gut microbiome is compromised in some way, and this test will tell you exactly how. Okay, I was not going to go on to Blackboard, but let me see if I can pull this up really quickly. Caroline's example here. Okay, so this is Kelly's his GI map and MRT protocol. So if you scroll all the way down, or at least a lot further, okay, so this is a GI map example. Okay, so look at all these things that are being tested. Okay, so he looked, H. pylori was negative. So the normal bacteria flora, he's got a couple of things. He's got something that's low and something that's too high. So they can do eradication protocols where it functions to lower the bacterial growth that is too high, and that's the same. It's also true for parasites. They'll elicit die-off reactions using, for instance, biocidin, and then after they kill that off, then you can eliminate, you can excrete that in your urine, and the assumption would be then that you would have, for instance, a low level of parasite, and therefore your system would be functioning better. Okay, these are actually mentioned in chapter 1 of your textbook. So if you're not remembering what these are, you can go back and look. But again, this all has to do with the microbiota. Okay. So these are opportunistic bacteria. Some of these might look familiar to you, like Pseudomonas. Okay, this patient, so this is Kelly, it was high. All of these perturbations, this is actually very commonly seen in autistic children. Okay, so we are pretending that this is Kelly's GI map. It is not actually his GI map. It's from an autistic boy. So it's from someone with low functioning autism who was recently placed on a very strict diet. So some of his inflammation markers for his GI tract have been eliminated from diet change. But now he still shows behavioral symptoms, and so they've done this test, and based on the test, they can go somewhere else in terms of his treatment. So the idea is that possibly, he's got some autoimmune triggers and some dysbiotic overgrowth bacteria, and so that can now be directly addressed and hopefully improve his symptoms. Okay, so, looking at blood in the stool, general intestinal health, and it's also really interesting for people with autoimmune conditions, getting your IgA. This is really important to know what this looks like. Okay, clarithromycin is positive. And these are things that, speak to antibiotic resistance. So keeping in mind, right, that, Kelly has been on a lot of antibiotics in his lifetime. Well, he actually has a gene that makes him resistant to this particular antibiotic. So if we go back and look at his history, the question is, did the doctors account for that, or did they, give him this antibiotic, which was not doing anything other than disturbing his gut flora and, killing off the good bacteria. Okay, and then the practitioners who interpret these GI maps, they give you a protocol to follow. So this is a supplement protocol that was recommended based on the aforementioned GI map. Okay. All right. So this is a protocol that, this is an explanation of some of the things up here. So Carolyn really goes into depth, and she's not the only one that can make these protocols. But so another thing to just consider is that from the GI map, there are foods that you can consider using instead of using supplements to address the issue. So that's something that a functional nutritionist can work with, can help you work through. Okay, so if we go back here, what you can see is that there are various panels, but the GI map, the microbial assay, is the one that I would recommend. Okay. So once you get to here, you can view the guide, the one that I had previously pulled up, by clicking view here. Okay. And so, when you're considering doing this test, I would say that if you have been, struggling with depression, struggling with IBS, celiac, chronic fatigue, things where you're not really getting answers from your doctor, or you're just really not sure what to do anymore, this is a go-to test for those types of people. It is not a cheap test, and it depends on where you purchase the test from. So if you are interested in doing this test, you can email me and I will help you get set up with a practitioner to do it, because they can save you money. In terms of the test will be the same, but they will charge you a reduced rate for the interpretation of the results.